Hello, my name is Neil and I'm a Professor of Planetary Science at the University of Oxford, but more important this afternoon, I'm a member of the Living on the Moon team. Now, we exhibited at the Royal Society in 2019, so last summer. Now, obviously this year things are a little bit different, but it has given us a chance to answer some more of your questions. And I've got a great question here from Raj Karur. Now, Raj is asking, what's your thought on asteroid mining? Now that's a really interesting and quite a complicated question to answer. And I think there are two ways to think about this and two important things that you need to consider. So the first is, why might you want to mine an asteroid? What would you be doing with it? And the second is, can you mine an asteroid? How straightforward would that be? So the first thing to think about is, why might you mine an asteroid? Well, one of the things about asteroids is that they may contain minerals or materials that you can use in space to then make more things. So things like, for example, if you're far enough away from the sun, they might have water-bearing minerals or actual ice locked up in them if they are, in the outer part of what we call the asteroid belt, a gap between Mars and Jupiter. Or they could be, they could contain valuable minerals or building materials. So they could be useful essentially for refueling or replenishing things on the way to other places to explore. Whether it's worth going to an asteroid, collecting the material and bringing it all the way back to Earth, that's a much more complicated question. It's possible there might be particular elements that make it useful, but it's very unlikely that would be the first reason why you would go to an asteroid. You're more likely to go to an asteroid, in my opinion, and it is just my opinion, this is a very interesting, why it's such an interesting point, to actually use essentially for what's called in situ resource utilization. So a way of using the resources that are there to then go explore further and more sustainably within the solar system. The other part of the question, though, is, how would you do it? Would it be straightforward? And this is actually quite a difficult question to answer as well, because the engineering required to actually go to an asteroid is quite tricky. So at the moment, we are involved in a mission called NASA's OSIRIS-REx. So it's led by the American Space Agency called OSIRIS-REx, and it will be going to an asteroid called Bennu, a near-Earth asteroid, to collect a sample from it and then bring it back to Earth. But I think it's really telling that the way that NASA have decided to do this is by essentially sticking out a probe, essentially a bit like a vacuum cleaner head on a stick, and then going up, touching onto the surface of the asteroid for as short a period of time as possible, firing nitrogen gas to fluidized the surface, and then collecting the material in a kind of filter around the edges before stowing it on spacecraft to bring back to Earth. So why are they doing that? Why are we doing what's called touch and go sampling? Well, the reason is because the vicinity around an asteroid could be very hazardous for a spacecraft to be. They tend to be rotating quite quickly, a lot of them. Bennu rotates in a few hours. And they have very different gravity environments compared to the Earth. It's very irregular. And they could also be emitting particles. I mean, we see Bennu has actually been releasing particles around the asteroid. So it's actually quite an interesting, complicated environment, which is very difficult to get up close to and sample. So our first tests of this will be pretty quick. In the future, of course, that may be different. We have better guidance and navigation and control systems and that kind of stuff. But it's a hazardous environment, so it's complicated and difficult to do. And I think the reason for doing it would be for in situ resource utilization to further our exploration of the solar system. So it is technically possible. Whether it's worth doing and why we do it are really the open questions that need to be answered. That requires more work. So it's a very interesting question. Thank you for it.